Know first and always who your enemies are. They are those who attack you, they are those who threaten to attack, and there are even those who might attack one day. Crush them before they get the chance. Hello everybody. Do you like dwarves? Do you like rock and stone? Do you like space dwarves? Well, then you have come to the right place, because today it is time to meet the kin, or what is better known to those in the universe, the Leagues of Votan. In the universe of 40k, these fellas are a breath of fresh air, if that air came with a distinct smell of brew, rock dust and chemical BO. So let's come along and have a look at the Votan. The asteroid mine of Deep Vein 9 shuddered under the Orc assault. Explosions boomed in the vacuum-sealed tunnels as crude rocket launchers punched through bulkheads. Hartkin Brukar crouched behind a shattered ore cart, his heavy rifle humming with residual heat. His exo-armor was scorched and dented, but the dense muscle beneath still held firm. Blood ran dark and thick, seeping from a gash along his sides where an orc chopper had found a joint. Around him, 3 of his kin lay dead. Good kin. Their bodies would be returned to the ancestors if anyone survived this. The last transmission through the battle receiver had been clear. Hold the vein. Delay the greenskins. Reinforcements is en route. Efficiency above all. Efficiency. Brokar almost laughed, a grim sound lost in the roar of battle. The orcs had come in force, lured by the promise of rich promethium and the blood of kin. A massive shave barreled through the dust-choked corridor, taller than a Hartkin by a half again, clad in scrap plate armor, welded with crude glyphs. Wielding a massive power claw in one hand and a shooter spitting bullets the size of fist in the other. Brockhart's clone skin enhanced eyes locked on. He calculated angles in a heartbeat, felt the gravity fluctuations in his bones, and the weak point in the nob's armor where previous shot had boggled the plate stood clear to him. The rifle cracked! 3 massive reactive rounds slammed home. One punched through the shoulder plate, detonating inside green flesh. Another clipped the claw, shearing accutators. The third struck the jaw, blowing teeth and metal across the tunnel. Yet the orc charged. Brokard met it head-on, firing from the hip as he sidestepped. His dense frame absorbed the recoil that would have staggered a baseline human. He triggered the grav harness in his boots, anchoring himself against the low G drift, and slammed the rifle stock into the knob's face like a hammer. Bone crunched. The orc staggered, but its claws swung in a wild arc. Brokard stepped back, but not fast enough. The power claw's edge caught his pauldron, shearing through armor and into muscle. Pain flared, white hot. He felt ribs creak under the pressure, but held. Endure, he told himself. The ancestors watch. The kin refers to the members of the race that makes up the League of Votan. And they are a truly old race that trace their origins back to the time around what humanity refers to as the Dark Age of technology. However, to all the members of the leagues, it is referred to as the Age of Myth. The knowledge and history of this time exist in a peculiar state, as all of the records of what happened during this time is preserved and kept within the consciousness archives of the ancestors' cores. And should they be able to be accessed, all manner of truths would be revealed both about the leagues, their past, and even humanity around the Golden Age. However, I will touch upon later in the video why this has not happened. And I'll give a little spoiler, it has something to do with the current state of the ancestor cores that makes it so that the line between facts and glitch is dangerously vague. There are facts that has been digged out from the vastness of the ancestor mines, however, and that is much of the history of the kin. In here we find quite a bit of references to something called the Gilded Ones, being the wisest and the eldest of what they called the first ancestors, sending them forth and asking something they refer to as the stone mind to oversee the first crucible that would birth the very first kin. What else has been verified and known about the history of the kin is that around this time there were mining explorers, prospectors and settlers setting out for areas around the galactic core, which they call the Exodus. They would leave an incredibly large number of fleets consisting of sub-light generation vessels on what they refer to as the Long March towards this core. And these ships would contain everything that they would come to know and what they would need for this very goal, settling the galactic core. I sidestep for a second here because there is quite a number of things that we know about this time from both the lore and some of my other videos, with the idea in mind that a fleet of the Votan is dependent on sublight engines and gravity sling drives. It means that this long march had begun long before the first encounters with the warp and the invention of the warp drive in Gellerfield. Furthermore, according to what we know about the Golden Age, or the Age of Myth, is that these ships were sent out early and were populated by a combination of settlers but also the Men of Stone. In the modern 40k, we meet what is confirmed to be a surviving Man of Stone named Kron, and that person reveals quite a number of truths with just his pure existence. From his description and disposition, we can learn from Kron that he does not share any bodily or biological traits or even cultures that resembles the kin in any fashion. We also learn that a major part of being a Man of Stone is being a creature of flesh, silica and cybernetics. But this does not entirely dispute the idea of the Leagues of Votan being related to the Men of Stone. Allow me to explain this. The kin are incredibly hardy and sturdy, having been engineered to be ready to face off against anything that the core of the galaxy could throw at them. With denser bones and heavier layers of muscle, they are much stronger than any baseline human, and combined with high red and white blood cell counts, they are vastly more resilient and capable of enduring physical strain and labor. While this may initially seem like pretty basic genetic engineering, we also encounter the fact that the kin have specialized eyesight that allows them to see infrared and even in some cases extended electromagnetic spectrums. Furthermore, their internal biology have been designed in such a way as to make them resistant to harsh gravity, extreme temperatures and toxic environments, creating a little broad space dwarf that does not give a hoot or a flying frack about anything that the cosmos can throw at him. I believe that amongst the first ancestors that the kin refer to, as per standard back then, a contingent of Men of Stone would watch over these pioneers as they would sleep in their stasis pods. Here they would be maintaining and preparing them for the rigors that they would face. The Men of Stones are problem solvers bar none. They use their incredible technological knowledge to create new technologies and coming up with solutions that, while lacking in any sort of grace, will create as a permanent solution as they possibly can. When they started encountering the incredible dangers of the galactic core, they would realize that the future of these colonists could not be made to rely on just their technology. No, they had to improve upon the colonists themselves. With sturdier bones for resisting extreme gravity, dense muscle, radiation resistance, and all of the other things that would come to define the kin in the future. These alterations were created to be stable, like everything else touched by the Men of Stone, and as such they created a series of genetic templates to be used for enacting these changes and making sure that they would follow uniform henceforth. They have since been known to the modern kin as clone skeins. The clone skeins has become the main way for the kin to keep up their numbers, as one of their recognized first truths, sort of a mix of culture, saying and historical facts, and that is that they are a people of clones, tracing their genetic templates back to the original ancestors, which is a point of fierce pride for each individual kin. After these thousands of years, as is the fate of all systems and technology, degradation has started to creep in, and this has manifested in minor alterations and mutations within most of the clone genes. For now, these are relatively benign, taking the form of unusual colored eyes, cracky subdermal layers, and even strange chemical body odors. And it really speaks to the stability and the quality of this clone technology that it is only in the modern times that this has begun to show any sort of degradation. However, it is not only biology that these clone genes has determining factors in. When a member of the Leagues of Votan exits the crucible from which he or she is created, they have also taken upon themselves the role and social status which their clone gene brings upon them. Meaning that a kin whose ancestry line is that of mining workers will always be a mining worker, making any sort of social adaptability basically non-existent. Not that the individual kin would necessarily want to move anywhere else, as they come with all of the genetic predications for excelling at the role chosen for them. And this may seem like an odd segue, but that actually leads me to the next thing that is a little weird and special about the kin, and that is their souls. Both imperial records and the records of the Votan agree that the kin's souls shine far more dimly within the warp than those of baseline humans. This means that they are far less likely to be preyed upon by warp predators, as well as granting them a strong natural resistance to warp mutations, possessions, and overall corruptions due to the temptation of chaos. This is the sort of thing that seems like a really good thing. It is actually a symptom of something quite sinister about the kin, even if it's not intentional. Every living thing in the galaxy, with only a few astronomical exceptions, has a soul. It is a fact of the universe. The soul expresses things like emotions, creativity, drive, spirituality, and arguably everything that makes a person a person. For a soul to be muted, it means that something has to be actively doing so, either through warp shenanigans, like draining off the soul until it snuffs out, through technology that will limit a person in what they can experience or even express, or a culture that locks people into chains of social limitations, looking at you, the Eldar. The Leagues of Votan are an incredibly rigid society, where such things as artistic creativity, high emotions, and drive for anything other than your assigned role is suppressed both from the top but also among those sharing your very own social level, meaning that over untold generations, the kin has had their souls suppressed into a small shape that is unappetizing to the warp, but also create living creatures that are fundamentally alien to us that have a free burning soul. I did, however, mention exceptions, and even here amongst the Leagues we find them in the form of something called a psychoactive clone gene. This is the rarest case of clone gene being activated and created by the Crucible, and it creates a member of the League of Votan referred to as a Grimnia. This creates a kin which is granted limited, I guess you would call it quasi-psychic abilities, making them among the only kin capable of interacting with the warp in a controlled manner. These Grimnia are nothing compared to Imperial Psychers, or even Psychers amongst other races, as they cannot manifest the warp, but instead can channel small amounts of immaterial energy in a relatively controlled manner, meaning that they can interact with artifacts and technologies based around the warp, but basically cannot do anything much more than that. Again, not that they would ever want to. In combat, their roles are that of a supportive nature, using ancient barrier technology from staves that use this channeled energy to provide them and their allies with powerful shielding, while outside of combat, they are the only ones who can interact with the very thing that grants the Leagues their namesake, the Votan. When not serving in a battlefield role, the Grimnia find themselves in a peculiar role as a combination of advisor, priest, and tech support. They are the only ones who can interface with the Votan, effectively making them the caste who sits on all of the history and all of the technological knowledge of the entire race. And just to put it out there, we have never seen a situation where such a thing would be used for the betterment of oneself rather than the betterment of everyone else. Anyways, they draw forth requests of tactical information, historical context, warp lanes, and basically anything that their fleets and league leaders require of them, bringing this information to something called the Heart Sparks, basically a local council that would then go on to larger councils. And they do this no matter how grim or dire that the information is. They're also the ones who oversee the data rights, that make sure that all of the records of the deeds of any member of the kin is recorded and returned to the ancestor mind within the Votan. This is considered sacred and a version of ancestor worship that they have been engaging in for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. Now, I have mentioned the Votan quite a few times, so it's about time that I explain what this most important thing about the faction actually is. There are many theories about what exactly these mighty machines are, and while I might take my parrot some of it, I think I got quite a few theories that shed a lot of light on how these things today would actually function. We have verified that the sublight ships of these factions were sent out at the very beginning, or even a little before the beginning of the golden age of technology, meaning that on such expeditions was sent along a system meant to guide and assist the colonist in overcoming anything that the galaxy could oppose them with. The more advanced versions of these systems would later be called the STC, the massive machines used during the true colonizations of the galaxy after the discovery of the war drive. The STC can quite often be considered a fully functional AI, or at the very least extremely advanced simulated intelligence, while the Votan, aka the ancestor cores, are the more primitive version of this. An ancestor core is a truly staggering and complex request-based archive, meaning that the ones capable of interacting with it is essentially inputting a question, and then the computer computates for any sort of possible answers and start running an entire search process. The core searches everything within itself, searching for all available data that this venerate machine has encountered about the designated question or topic. But not only that, it does not simply spew out facts, but actually starts ruminating, thinking and refining its answers, ending up giving the Grimnia an incredibly precise and well thought of answers to that specific question. These machines run on hardware and processes developed during the burgeoning times of the near start of the Golden Age, meaning that their computing power of such a machine would be out of anything we could ever imagine. And the fact that a person has to channel minuscule amounts of warp energy in order to interface with it means that there is a certain level of mental aptitude and aspect to it. I like to think that these computing processes are basically occurring at the speed of thought, and as such it requires thought techniques and a quasi-psyker in order to input a request. I really love the idea of a Grimnia sitting at his altar in front of this massive audio output device of the Votan core, sitting in deep meditation because he is in active communion with the core. The core constantly probing his mind, not for any sinister purpose, but because it needs to check and check again and recheck the request. And a very skilled Grimnia would be able to, while communing, slightly alter the request while the core is computing. Another facet of this incredible machine is that it works with a special piece of technology called quantum pair computing. Now, most people start getting cross-eyed when talking about quantum anything, and a lot of sci-fi just throws quantum in front of anything that they need to basically be magic. But I have a tiny itsy bitsy knowledge about this concept. The idea is that on a very basic level, there are quantum elements that behave the same way no matter what distance that they are put at. The idea is that if one part of the element is altered to produce an outcome, the very same thing will happen to the other twin element. This means that a computer using this concept can exchange information with another computer archive at a cosmic distance instantaneously using a law of the universe rather than any state-altered matter. Phew! So, okay, this means that all of the Votann draw either from each other or another database, meaning that while all working in unison, and when this works perfectly, this computation system is pretty much capable of answering anything, anytime, anywhere, with any information in any size. And also consider that anything that you add to one of these computers automatically gets added to anyone within this, let's call it quantum network. Sounds amazing, right? Yes and also no. In the shadowed depths of Old Vardak, beneath layers of adamantine and void-shielded stone, Grimnia Thrain Iron Vein nailed within the Thane. The chamber hummed with ancient machinery, coils of crystalline circuitry that pulsed like golden veins, and braziers of Promethean flame that cast shadows across rune-edged walls. His ancestral warding stave rested across his knees, its head a stylized visage of the Votann itself, while two CURV drones hovered slightly at his shoulders, their bolters cold and their energy fields attuned to detect any empiric bleed. Thrain felt his mind melt with the otherworldly energies, like a burning behind his eyes, a familiar fire that bridged flesh and machine. Around his neck hung the warding crest, its form channeling barrier tech to shield his dim soul even further from the warp's hungry touch. He had come alone this time. The question was too delicate for witnesses, even other Grimnia.
Ancestor,
he intoned, voice steady as forged steel.
The bane sturges on the fringes again. Hive-fleet tendrils probe the outer belts. We have harvested much biomatter in counter raids, but our projections falter. What cause balances the ledger? Speak, that your kin might endure yet.
The connection formed. A vast, ancient presence brushed against his mind, cold, immense, layered with the accumulative lives of untold generations. Data streams flowed like glacial melt. Thrain felt the weight of millennia pressing down upon him, the gestalt, the wisdom of the Votann core known as KL9. It was old, even by the standard of their kin, one of the first given form in the Long March. The legend spoke of the ancient times where communion was swift like light. Flashes of star charts, tactical overlays, genetic viability assessments, then the slowdown. The stream of data thickened, quarries looped through redundant vaults. KL9's responses would fracture into recursive self-checks, burdened by centuries of uploaded minds and duplicated experiences. Thrain felt the delay like a physical drag on his soul. Hours passed in the real world, then days. His body, engineered for endurance, began to protest. The Grimnia had fasted before the communions, but never this long. Thrain's stomach crammed into a hard knot. His enhanced metabolism cannibalized fat reserves and then his muscles. His vision blurred at the edges, not from warp strain, but simply deprivation. The drones registered his vitals and offered nutrient injectors from their dispensers. He refused with a curt gesture. To break the link now would sever the thread. All progress, even partial answers, every probability lattice, it would all reset. KL9 might take longer next time.
Patient ancestor. I am kin, and I endure.
These machines have been running without pause for thousands upon thousands of years and years. Running machines, ships, clone schemes, crucible, advisory roles, genome regulation, ship routes, manifest, weapon specs, construction templates, science, philosophy, military theory, geological data, survival strategies, depths, grudges, laws, and pretty much anything. And I mean everything, but it does not stop there. The kin has come to view the ancestor cause with a degree of ancestor worship, and one of the many ways that they express this is through the act of remembering the dead. This means that upon the death of a member of the Votan, every piece of data about them, and I mean every piece of data, will be uploaded back into the ancestor core. I personally believe that this started out with the best of intentions, allowing experience to accumulate in the archives and kind of probably a way of monitoring how clone schemes were doing. However, this slowly became altered the way that it is today, that every recorded thought, opinion, habit and story about the individual kin is uploaded. This may seem small considering, the scale of the computer, the hardware that it's running on, but then again, thousands upon thousands of years, billions, if not trillions, if not quadrillions of Votan on a cosmic scale. I mean, even if attempts were made at upgrading this golden age of tech hardware these machines are running with, the degradation would come creeping steadily until it was inevitable. Requests would be slowed, archived information would require higher and higher levels of mastery to request, and entire databases would be closed off due to paradoxical thought loops, and all of this is just gonna get worse and worse. Grimnia have been known to make a request only to then having the answer returned to them so slowly that it is handed down to their successors, who then might have to make alterations to the request. Yeah, while the leaks of Votan seem incredibly advanced and dangerous, which they are also something that we don't get to see a lot of in fiction. A race that is pretty much at their zenith, and now we get to witness the decline. Thank you so much for watching the video. There is so much to discuss and dive into about the Votan, so consider spreading this video around to your friends, subscribing and handing down a like and a comment, because I will be engaging how well this video is doing before I dive into more Space Dwarfs. So, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.